Welcome back to ASX Market Watch. Well, welcome back if you are returning from last week. If this is your first time to watch these videos, then welcome for the first time. It's really good to have you. This week we'll be looking at three markets, the ASX Top 200, which is a great barometer or a way of looking at the Australian share market and determining which way we should be trading. For instance, if the ASX Top 200 is heading up, obviously we'd want to be taking long positions because 3 out of 4 stocks will actually follow the overall market. We'll also be looking at the Dow Jones and we'll also be looking at the FTSE, just because they're really the main indices that we like to watch and sort of to get an idea of where everything might be heading and even where we might be finding resistance in the future. But this week, all we're going to do is just check out where the market's heading. So simply, all I've done is draw our first uptrend line. This is a daily chart of the ASX Top 200. It's up to date, up to last Friday. And we've got our uptrend line, and the reason why we can do that is because we've got higher peaks and higher troughs. Very simple. And we've got 2 troughs, so we can draw our longer term uptrend line. Also, what I've done is I've drawn our longer term downtrend line, which was crossed in July 2009. Now that has actually started this great bull run over the last probably about 6 to 8 weeks now, which has been great. But where is the market likely to head in the next few weeks? Well, if you've done any analysis into cycles analysis, if you've done any research into cycles analysis, then you'll know that September is actually the weakest month of the year. John Murphy wrote a great book about cycles analysis, or like incorporating cycles analysis into the trading methods that he uses. And yeah, basically in that he said September is traditionally the weakest month of the year, not October, in which all the crashes happen, ironically. So what we could be looking for is a bit of a downturn. But at the end of the day, nothing has really confirmed yet. So I've just drawn in our shorter term uptrend line. And as you can see, it hasn't even crossed the shorter term uptrend line, let alone crossed below the previous trough as well, which would confirm our sell signal, at least in the shorter term. Longer term, we'd be looking for a close below about 4100, which is the longer term uptrend line. So really I would count the market as still being bullish longer term until it crosses this longer term uptrend line. Now, a few people have been emailing me and they've actually said that the FTSE Asia index is reweighting their index and downgrading Australia. Now, what this means for Australian shares is that apparently there'll be about $5 billion worth of selling that's going to be hitting the Australian market, just because, you know, they're being downgraded from, I think, 45% to 35% or something like that in the weighting of the Asia index. Now, $5 billion worth of selling, it sounds like a lot. But what I've done this week is I've added the volume down here. If you could see, the volume on this chart is on the ASX Top 200. Now, looking at a day, probably about 2 to 3 weeks ago, one single day's worth of volume was 4.4 billion. So, in all honesty, $5 billion worth of volume is not going to be quite a lot. Like, it's really not going to move the market. If anything, people are going to get spooked out over last year's events. So sort of September, October, November was very bearish for the market, and people might get a little bit spooked over that. But at the end of the day, I still see a lot of buying, and I'm not going to be taking short positions until it crosses our long-term uptrend line. Again, as simple as it seems, it really does work, at least for me. Now I'd really like to look at the Dow Jones. Just quickly again, don't want to keep you too long. We are all busy, I do know. I've just drawn in my uptrend line. This is the longer term uptrend line. And I've also drawn in the longer term downtrend line. Now this is the only thing that I'm worried about with the Dow Jones. Longer term, we still have, as you can see, we've got the 2 peaks here. Longer term, we've still got a little bit of resistance coming up. Now that's in the future. So we might see a Santa Claus rally, which is sort of from November to January, traditionally the strongest months of the year, again, according to cycles analysis, which can be found in John Murphy's book. I think it's Technical Analysis of the Stock Market. It's pretty much a classic. It's used in all the schools these days anyway, which is great for technical analysis. In this day and age, back in the day, they didn't actually have books like that. Now, yeah, so that's the only thing that I'm really worried about, is about 10,200 really. that we might find quite a bit of resistance, if not before. Now, the Dow Jones is already showing signs of weakness. If you do have a look, I'll quickly draw in the... What else have we got? We just need the shorter term uptrend line. Now, as you can see, it has crossed our shorter term uptrend line. It hasn't crossed below the previous trough, which is just there. So really, I mean, that would be a good signal of bearishness. And as you can see, it's actually probably going to meet and converge. We've got our longer term uptrend line, which is basically around the 9,000 level. We've got our previous trough, which is about the 9,050 level. And so really, we could be seeing all this happening at once. And when it does happen all at once, it's a great signal. So if all these things are crossed, we're looking at a fairly bearish signal for the Dow Jones. But again, not yet. So really, we've got to wait for confirmation, not speculation. It's no good speculating. We can do it all day, and it is fun to do, but it definitely hasn't made me any money anyway. So definitely wait for confirmation there. Now, the last one I want to look at is the FTSE. And the FTSE, again, very simple. Here's our uptrend line. It looks very similar to the other uptrend lines, doesn't it? It's just how interrelated all these markets actually are. The next one is our shorter term uptrend line. Again, hasn't crossed it. It hasn't even closed below it, or maybe it has once, but then it's actually come back to close above it again. So just shows how strong the support for these trend lines really is. I absolutely love them, if you can't tell. Now, it would have to close below the previous trough, which is about 4,800, about 4,750, as well as the uptrend line, for us to get an early bearish signal. For the long-term bearish signal, we'll be looking at around the 4,500 mark, where the long-term uptrend line is. And the last things that I've drawn in for the FTSE is our downtrend lines. Now, similar to the Dow Jones, we're looking at a lot of overhead resistance. Now, this is coming up in the future. Again, possibly after the Santa Claus rally, you'll find that oftentimes with overhead hanging resistance like this, it doesn't actually get all the way up to that resistance. You'll find that people start selling long beforehand. Now, if it gaps up through this long-term downtrend line, then that's going to be a very bullish signal. It'll probably fill the gap and continue upwards. Well, which way it's going to go, I don't really know. Again, I don't like to speculate. I just like to trade by my rules, and that usually is what makes me the most money. So I hope this has helped you a whole bunch, and it's really great to have you. I really enjoy doing these things, as I've said before. Again, if this is the first time you've joined me, welcome, and it's great to have you. And if you're returning, it's excellent to have you back, and I really appreciate being able to tell you these things. If you want, stop by the website at asxmarketwatch.com. It's got all the tools that I use, and it's all free. So please, if you want to learn about the market, do check it out. Don't spend $5,000 on a course, because most of it's on my website. So, great. Again, thank you so much for stopping by, and have a great week. See you next week.